Now coming to the subclavian artery and scalenes anterior. Subclavian artery is divided into three parts by scalenes anterior. Behind the scalenes anterior is the subclavian artery, and in front is the subclavian vein. Subclavian artery is divided into three parts. First part, which is the proximal part, gives rise to the VIT, vitamin C and D. Remember the mnemonic vitamin C and D. VIT is the vertebral artery, internal thoracic artery, thyrocervical trunk. This thyrocervical trunk again gives rise to three branches: SIT, that is the suprascapular artery, inferior thyroid artery, transverse cervical artery. Transverse cervical artery gives rise to two branches, that is the superficial branch, which supplies the trapezius muscle, deep branch, which supplies the rhomboid muscle and the levator scapulae muscle. The second part, which is the deep part, gives rise to costocervical trunk. The third part, that is the distal part, gives rise to dorsal scapular artery. It is present only, the dorsal scapular artery is present only when the deep branch of the transverse cervical artery is absent. Now coming to the diagram, that is, this is the scalenes anterior muscle, which divide the subclavian artery into proximal, deep and the distal part, distal, deep, proximal part. Proximal part gives rise to three arteries, three branches, that is the VIT, that is the vertebral artery, I is the internal thoracic artery, T is the thyrocervical trunk. The vertebral artery passes into foramen transversarium from C6 to C1 vertebral level. It doesn't pass the C7, only it is rarely present, it is sometimes present, and if it is present also, it doesn't pass through that. Only the vertebral vein and the sympathetic plexus passes through it. Foramen transversarium is present in all the cervical vertebra from C1 to C7. The vertebral artery passes only from C6 to C1 level, but not from C7 level, even if it is present. If present, only it transmits what? It transmits the vertebral vein and the sympathetic nerves. Now coming to the scalenes anterior muscle, it arises from the transverse process of the cervical vertebra, not rib, it is the vertebra, to the scalene tubercle of the first rib behind the clavicle. Now coming to it is divided into three parts. This is the first part, which gives rise to three branches, that is the vertebral artery, vertebral internal thoracic artery, which is down behind the clavicle, so we cannot see here. This is the thyrocervical trunk. This thyrocervical trunk is divided into three branches: SIT. S is the suprascapular artery, transverse cervical artery, and the SIT, inferior thyroid artery. And the third part gives rise to the distal to the scalenes anterior, and it gives rise to dorsal scapular artery. Now coming to the posterior intercostal artery, that is the first and the second posterior intercostal artery, arises from the costocervical trunk. Second to the 11th, it arises directly from the descending thoracic aorta. Anterior intercostal artery, from first to the 6th, it arises from the internal thoracic artery, that is the branch of subclavian artery. From 7th to the 9th, it arises from the musculophrenic artery, that is the terminal branch of internal thoracic artery. Now coming to the scalenes anterior muscle, anterior and the posterior relation. Anterior relation is the carotid sheath and its content, phrenic nerve, thoracic carotid sheath and its content, phrenic nerve. And the branches of thyrocervical trunk, there are three branches: SIT. From S is the suprascapular artery, transverse cervical artery, and the inferior thyroid artery. Remember, subclavian vein is also superficial, along with the means anterior comes in the anterior relation, and even the clavicle. In the posterior relation, only two things will come, that is the subclavian artery and the trunks of brachial plexus. Now coming to the live image, this is the thyrocervical. This is the subclavian artery, which is divided into three parts by scalenes anterior muscle. Remember the clavicle and subclavian vein, along with the thyrocervical trunk branches, that is the suprascapular, inferior thyroid vein, inferior thyroid artery, suprascapular and transverse cervical artery are present anteriorly, along with the internal carotid artery and its content, even the phrenic nerve. These are the anterior relation. Posterior relation is the brachial plexus and the subclavian artery.